Imagine living in a world where a simple mistake, stealing food, insulting someone important, or even saying the wrong thing, could change your life forever. In ancient China, the law wasn't just a list of rules. It was a powerful system designed to keep order across a vast and complex empire. From the emperor's palace to the smallest villages, justice was strict, and often it was harsh. Ancient Chinese society valued order, hierarchy, and obedience. Everyone had a place, and every action had a consequence. Punishment wasn't just about teaching someone a lesson, it was about keeping the entire society in balance. Harsh penalties weren't the exception, they were expected. In fact, they were seen as necessary to keep things from falling apart. The law served many purposes. It pleased emperors who demanded control, followed philosophies that shaped moral behavior, and responded to a public that feared chaos. The result was a justice system that was both highly organized and deeply intimidating. But this raises a serious question. Was it really justice? That question sits at the heart of China's legal history. On one side, the laws aimed to be fair and moral. On the other, the punishments used to enforce them could be terrifying and cruel. Punishments that didn't just hurt the body, but damaged a person's spirit and identity. Some penalties were meant to scare others into obedience. Others stripped people of their dignity entirely. Whether through tattooing, mutilation, exile, or execution, the state made sure everyone saw its power and remembered it. Yet even in these severe times, there were signs of compassion, moments of resistance, and efforts to reform the system. So, was ancient Chinese justice a harsh necessity, or was it simply cruelty in disguise? To find the answer, we need to look closely at the stories, the ideas, and the punishments that defined more than 2,000 years of Chinese history. To understand why punishments in ancient China were so harsh, we have to look back to the very beginning. Long before the empire was unified, early dynasties like the Shang and Zhou had already started creating legal systems. These early laws weren't just about running a country. They were tied to moral beliefs and cosmic order. They were written on bamboo or carved into bronze, and they carried deep symbolic meaning. One of the earliest examples we have is the Zhuli, or Rights of Zhou. This text shows us that law wasn't just about rules. It was about keeping harmony between heaven, earth, and the people. It taught that punishment could help restore balance when that harmony was broken. Later on, during the Sui dynasty, the Kaihuang Code was written. This was the first complete legal code that survived in full. It would later shape the Tang Code, which became one of the most important and long-lasting legal systems in Chinese history. Then came the Qin dynasty. When Qin Shi Huang united China in 221 BCE, he introduced a fully codified, centralized legal system. His goal was clear: complete control. The Qin legal code was strict, detailed, and extremely harsh. They believed that only severe punishments could quickly bring obedience to a newly unified empire. And this belief would leave a deep mark on Chinese law for generations. Two main schools of thought shaped how punishment worked in ancient China: legalism and Confucianism. Legalists believed people were naturally selfish. They thought strict laws and fear were the only ways to keep people in line. Even minor crimes should be punished severely, said legalist thinkers like Han Feizi. Confucians, meanwhile, emphasized morality, ethical leadership, and leading by example. In a perfect Confucian world, punishment would barely be needed, because people would already know right from wrong. In practice, Chinese rulers blended these philosophies. The law borrowed Confucian ideals to justify its morality, while applying legalist enforcement to secure obedience. It was a hybrid approach, fear wrapped in ethics. For centuries, the heart of ancient China's penal system rested on a set of penalties known as the Five Punishments, or Wu Xing. These were not temporary corrections or symbolic warnings. They were lasting transformations, both physical and social. The first, tattooing, Ma Xing, etched shame directly onto the skin. Criminals had their crimes inscribed visibly on their faces, branding them for life as outcasts in a society that valued honor and appearance. Next came nose-cutting, yi qing, a brutal mark of disgrace that visibly disfigured a person and publicly erased their dignity. It didn't just punish the individual, it humiliated their family too. Foot amputation, yue xing, severed a person's independence. In a world that relied on physical mobility, this punishment crippled one's ability to work, travel, or function in society. Castration, gongxing, was more than physical mutilation. It was a social and generational death. It erased a man's ability to father children, a devastating consequence in a culture rooted in filial duty and family legacy. Finally, there was execution, da ping. This came in various forms, from swift beheadings to the excruciating lingqi, or death by 1,000 cuts, which was as much psychological torment as physical agony. These punishments weren't simply about justice. They were about control. They targeted identity, dignity, and legacy, reminding everyone that breaking the law meant more than pain. It meant erasure. While the 5 punishments were central to ancient Chinese justice, they weren't the only methods used to uphold imperial order. Authorities employed a wide range of physical, psychological, and symbolic tactics to reinforce obedience and preserve control. Public beatings were among the most frequent. Administered with bamboo rods, these floggings could range from a humiliating handful of lashes to hundreds of brutal strikes. The punishment was often carried out in front of crowds, making shame a tool as sharp as any blade. Exile, or liu, banished convicts to remote, often harsh, territories. These were not merely new addresses. They were life sentences in unfamiliar and unforgiving environments, cutting individuals off from family, community, and ancestral roots. Penal labor consigned criminals to exhausting work on state projects, such as the construction of walls, roads, and canals. Shackled and watched by guards, many prisoners never returned. To extract confessions or coerce obedience, torture devices were also employed. The ankle-crushing jiagan and the finger-pinching zanji inflicted controlled but agonizing pain. Their purpose wasn't execution, it was compliance. And for the most severe transgressions, treason, rebellion, or insults to the emperor, punishments turned theatrical. Boiling, dismemberment, and even death by fire were used not just to eliminate, but to send a chilling message. These tools of punishment, though often overshadowed by the 5, were just as powerful in maintaining fear and enforcing silence. Their memory lingered long after the wounds had healed. Why were punishments in ancient China so harsh, so public, and often so permanent? To understand that, we need to look beyond the pain itself and ask what the state was really trying to achieve. In imperial China, punishment wasn't just about fixing a wrong. It was about maintaining order, controlling people, and reminding everyone who held the power. Justice wasn't always about fairness. More often, it was about deterrence. The main goal of many punishments was to scare people into obedience. Ancient Chinese rulers believed that if the consequences were terrifying enough, fewer people would dare to break the law. Public beatings, facial tattoos, amputations, these weren't just for the person being punished. They were warnings to everyone else. A man with a missing nose or a tattooed forehead was a walking message. Break the law, and this could happen to you. This idea wasn't unique to China, but the Chinese legal system took it very seriously. Punishments were meant to be seen, they were meant to last, and they were meant to remind people that the state was always watching. But it wasn't just about fear. Punishment was also about control. In ancient China, the emperor was seen as the son of heaven. His power came from a divine source, and the law was an extension of that power. So any threat to social harmony, a thief, a rebel, even someone who spoke out of turn, was seen as a threat to the emperor himself. That's why the legal system didn't always aim for balance or fairness, a servant talking back to a master could face serious punishment, while the same act from a noble might be ignored. The law wasn't a shield for the people, it was a tool for the rulers. It was about protecting the social order and keeping the hierarchy in place. The punishments also had a deep psychological effect. They were designed not only to hurt the body, but to shame the soul. Confucian values placed a high importance on family honor, reputation, and the duty to ancestors. So punishments like tattooing, castration, or exile didn't just cause pain. They destroyed a person's identity and cut them off from society. For example, someone with a facial tattoo couldn't hide their past. A man who had been castrated could no longer have children, which in Confucian belief meant he had failed his family. Being exiled meant being separated from your family's ancestral graves, which was considered deeply shameful. Even when people survived their punishment, they often couldn't return to a normal life. They were marked, rejected, and sometimes driven to suicide. The message was clear: once punished, always punished. In the end, ancient Chinese punishment wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and social. It was designed to make people fear not just pain, but the loss of dignity, the breaking of ties, and the permanent stain on their name. The law reached far beyond the courtroom. It reached into the heart of who you were and who you would never be again. Even in a justice system forged through fear and control, calls for compassion managed to break through. Not all voices were silenced, and not every ruler remained unmoved. Over time, a new current began to flow, one that sought not to undo punishment, but to humanize it. Confucian scholars, long advocating for governance rooted in virtue and moral leadership, pushed back against excessive cruelty. They argued that a ruler who inspired loyalty through kindness would rule more effectively than one who governed through fear alone. Their influence helped plant the seeds of legal reform. One powerful story that captured this shift was that of Ti Ying. When her father was condemned to castration, she penned a plea to the emperor, not just out of love, but with a deep moral argument. She wrote that such punishments destroyed families, crushed futures, and violated the values that bound society together. Her letter moved Emperor Wen of Han to spare her father, and more than that, it moved him to change the law. Emperor Wen's reforms were unprecedented. He abolished tattooing, nose cutting, and foot amputation, 3 of the 5 punishments, and replaced them with corporal beatings. It was still painful, but it left fewer permanent scars. For the first time in imperial history, mercy found a foothold in the legal code. These reforms didn't erase the system's harshness overnight, but they marked a crucial turning point, a recognition that punishment could maintain order without destroying lives. And Ti Ying's legacy endured as proof that even within the machinery of empire, a single voice could echo across generations. In ancient China, justice was anything but equal. The law didn't operate on blind fairness. It weighed status, wealth, gender, and family background before delivering its sentence. For the common people, peasants, workers, and the poor, punishments were swift and severe. Theft, defiance, or minor disruptions could bring flogging, mutilation, or even death. These individuals had little protection and fewer ways to appeal. Their suffering was seen as a necessary price for maintaining stability. By contrast, the elite often enjoyed legal leniency. Scholar officials, nobles, and those with imperial connections could escape physical punishment by paying fines or accepting demotion. Redemption payments, fees that replaced lashings or mutilation, turned justice into a privilege money could buy. This imbalance wasn't just corruption, it was strategy. The state needed educated elites to function, and weakening them through injury or death risked destabilizing governance. As a result, the powerful were often judged by separate standards, and sometimes separate courts. Gender added another layer of disparity. Women, expected to be obedient and modest, faced brutal consequences when they stepped outside societal roles. Adultery, disobedience, or asserting authority could result in execution or enslavement. Yet their punishments were often carried out in private, not out of mercy, but to preserve the image of female modesty. Children received some protection, especially those under the age of 10. They were often spared the harshest treatments, but that compassion disappeared quickly with age. Teens could face full penalties, and children who disrespected their elders were dealt with harshly, while abusive parents faced little to no consequence. Special groups like the imperial family, military heroes, and religious figures were also treated differently. Some were exempt from public trials. Others were pardoned outright. Even pregnant women, if sentenced to death, had their executions delayed until after childbirth. The message was clear. In ancient China, punishment was not only about what you did, it was about who you were. Social rank could protect or condemn you, making justice less a matter of law and more a matter of identity. Amid the severity of ancient China's legal system, rare but powerful moments of mercy emerged, offering glimmers of humanity in a landscape dominated by control. One of the most anticipated forms of clemency came directly from the emperor. During major events like imperial birthdays, enthronements, or national festivals, mass pardons were sometimes declared. These amnesties reduced sentences, released prisoners, or delayed executions. Though not everyone benefited, such gestures offered hope and reinforced the emperor's image as both ruler and moral guardian. Another avenue for mercy was monetary. The silver for skin system allowed individuals, usually those with wealth, to pay fines in place of corporal punishment. It was a form of legal substitution that spared the body but exposed deep class divides. The rich could buy relief, the poor could not. Even more moving were the personal appeals, petitions written by family members, especially mothers and daughters, pleading for a loved one's life. These letters, often rich in Confucian language about filial piety and loyalty, occasionally touched the hearts of judges or emperors. Though few succeeded, when they did, they left a mark on both law and legend. These moments of compassion didn't dismantle the harsh system, but they punctuated it, reminding the people that justice, while often unforgiving, could still listen. In a world ruled by law and hierarchy, small acts of grace mattered. They didn't change everything, but they changed enough to be remembered. To understand ancient Chinese punishment in context, it helps to compare it with other civilizations of the same era. What emerges isn't a tale of unique cruelty, but a broader pattern. Across the world, justice was often synonymous with fear. In ancient Rome, crucifixions and gladiatorial games blended punishment with public spectacle. In medieval Europe, torture devices and public executions, burnings, hangings, beheadings, served both to punish and to terrify. Status shaped outcomes there too. Nobles were spared the most humiliating punishments, while commoners bore the brunt. Ancient Persia and Babylonia codified harsh, eye-for-an-eye justice, much like the Chinese did. In India, caste often determined punishment, just as social rank did in China. And in Mesoamerica, the Aztecs tied justice to ritual and sacrifice, using death to appease the gods, as well as enforce order. What made China distinct was not the brutality itself, but the philosophy behind it. Chinese law was influenced by a constant tug-of-war between legalism and Confucianism, between authority and virtue, deterrence and moral leadership. While other cultures focused more heavily on punishment alone, China also debated its purpose. Legalist thinkers promoted fear as the foundation of obedience. Confucians pushed for governance through ethics and example. This ideological friction helped shape centuries of lawmaking, reform, and resistance. So, while the scars of ancient punishment were global, China stood out for how deliberately it organized and justified its legal system. Its punishments weren't just acts of vengeance. They were carefully crafted instruments of control, philosophy, and statecraft. The punishments of ancient China may belong to the past, but the questions they raise are timeless. How do societies maintain order without losing their humanity? Can justice be strong without being cruel? Today, China's legal system looks nothing like it did during the dynastic eras. The brutal tools of the past, tattoos, amputations, public beatings, have been replaced by structured legal codes, courtroom procedures, and a focus on imprisonment over mutilation. But even in this modern framework, echoes of earlier values remain. The emphasis on social harmony, the role of the state in shaping behavior, and the idea that law exists to maintain order, these concepts stretch back thousands of years. What's changed is how we think about punishment itself. Ancient justice aimed to deter through fear. Modern systems, at least in principle, aim to balance deterrence with rehabilitation, fairness, and human rights. The shift is not just legal, it's philosophical. We no longer accept that pain must equal justice. Studying ancient Chinese punishment reminds us that justice systems are never static. They reflect the values, fears, and priorities of their time. Laws evolve as societies evolve. What was once seen as necessary might now seem barbaric, and what we accept today may one day be questioned. There's also power in remembering. Museums, literature, and historical dramas across China preserve the stories of these punishments, not to glorify them, but to reflect on how far the country has come. These stories are cautionary, but they're also invitations to build systems that are just, not only effective. Ultimately, the legacy of ancient Chinese punishment teaches us this: justice isn't just about keeping order, it's about defining what kind of society we want to be. And that choice is always ours. For more details on this topic, check out the corresponding article on our website. You can find the link in the description below. Thanks for watching.